Buongiorno, greetings. My name's Bill Jepson and I'll be your tour guide today as we embark on a magical tour of the most famous sites in Italy. We are going to land here pretty soon after 14 hours of flying from Minneapolis. We're landing in Venice, Italy, where we'll start our tour. This week we'll proceed by train south to Pisa, as you can see in the map here. Pisa, Italy, and then Florence in the heart of Tuscany. And then further south to the capital of Italy, Rome, and the Vatican City. Then we'll continue on 2 hours farther south to Sorrento as a base on the Bay of Naples, which I always recommend as my favorite part of Italy. There we will explore 3 amazing places for a few days. The ancient city of Pompeii, buried in 79 AD and frozen in time. Positano, on our drive down the winding Amalfi Coast. And then the 3rd day we'll visit the beautiful island of Capri, all in this Bay of Naples. I've been there 5 times actually. I've been to Italy 5 times. In 1975 as a 20-year-old student. I looked like this with a beard. And I spent a semester in Greece, my junior spring, and traveled throughout Europe for 2 months, mostly alone, but spending 10 days in Italy as we headed from Greece up into the main part of Europe. And then in the 2000s, after midway into my career teaching high school world history and geography and in Hopkins, Eden Prairie, I had an alternative school and I started a overseas program there. Usually we would go with EF Tours, one of the largest tour operators. And every 6 students, the teacher goes for free. So we had 2 teachers here and 12 students, and the father came along with us that year too. But we went 3 times to Italy, usually combining it with Paris or Switzerland or Germany or Greece. And so it was a lot of fun. And then in 2005, my wife and 3 sons joined me there too, from Rome down to Sorrento. But this tour here will start at Venice. Venezia is the way they pronounce it in Italian. Venezia. We land in Venice and take a train along the causeway to the islands, this long causeway over the water of the Mediterranean Sea. And from the station we get off here and we're going to go down the Grand Canal to the Rialto. Our hotel is really close to that, the Rialto Bridge. And the other main site we'll see is San Marzo Square here with the bell tower and the cathedral. But there's lots to see in Venice. So you get off the train from the airport and you're thrust into this culture that's 1,000 years old or older. And you have this surreal and exhilarating experience with the sounds of Italian conversation and strange smells and the sight of ornate buildings built in the 1300s on either side of you as you get into a vaporetto. This is a vaporetto, kind of like a bus on water. It holds about 40, 50 people. and you head down the Grand Canal. And you can see these buildings were mostly built in the 1300s, was the heyday of the Venetian Empire. And so we head down the Grand Canal here from the Rialto Bridge. And here's a couple photographs that I took in 1975 with my Kodachrome slide film. They still hold up pretty well. 1975, Maggio 14th, May 14th, there was a big national convention, Cacciatori. And here's my old picture of the canal at that time. Those were the days you took like 20 pictures a day instead of 200 pictures every few hours. Now there's many different types of boats here that you wouldn't expect. What kind of boat do you think this is? On the right. Can you make a guess? It's a hearse. Yeah, you can see it's all black. You can see the casket's probably there. And then this one here is a cement mixer and a gondola. We'll go on a gondola right here in a second. But you look on either side and there's these 700-year-old buildings that are slowly sinking into the Mediterranean Sea, unfortunately. So we went there and it was our first overseas program in 2000. But it's a beautiful city, and the most iconic place there is the Rialto Bridge, which has a number of shops on it. And so it's a great meeting place to look down on the gondolas. And it's a typical place to get your photograph overlooking the canal. The one thing to do in Venice, as in almost every European city, there's a fish market. And it's a great place to start your day out because you get a real feel for what the people are like in Italy, in the language. Everybody's speaking in Italian. And our hotel was nearby, the Hotel Bernardi, on these skinny little streets. And as you walk through Venice, every other street is a canal. So there's a bridge to cross. There's kids playing on their bicycles. So it's a very different city that way. And so the first morning we go to the gondola station and we set up a gondola ride with 3 or 4 people in each gondola, and you'll hear them singing "O Sole Mio" in Santa Lucia. And sometimes they'll let you steer the boat, like one of my students there. So the gondola ride is really fun, very slow, it goes for a couple hours. And then now we'll walk down to the San Marzo Square. And as I was saying, here's those bridges across every other street is a canal. The water is not real clean, but the city is beautiful and has such a rich heritage. And this is the center of it, called San Marzo Square, where the cathedral was built in 1,000 years ago. Very ornate with beautiful frescoes and statuary, and the famous 4 bronze horses, which were made in 1204, and they're famous for having been stolen by Napoleon later in the 1800s for about 30 years, and then they were brought back to Venice. So they have a rich history that they set up there. And you know you're in Europe when you start hearing the bell tower peal every hour as you feed the pigeons surrounded by centuries-old buildings. It's fun to feed the pigeons in the square down there. There's a huge bell tower called the Campanile. And as you see on the left, unfortunately, it's flooding more and more every year because of global warming. So, it's unfortunate. It keeps getting worse every year. And then the last thing we'll do here is go to the Doge Palace right next to the cathedral, which is the headquarters for the Venetian Republic, which was a trading power throughout the Mediterranean for 1,000 years until 1800. And so that's where they call them the Doge, D-O-G-E-S, kind of like the dukes, but they were the leaders of the Venetian Empire. And across the canal is the Basilica Santa Maria and Guggenheim Museum, a really famous museum with lots of priceless paintings in it. So, Rivarece to Venezia, they call it Venezia instead of Venice. So now we'll head south towards Pisa. And Pisa is usually a one-day stop because the main thing to see here, of course, is the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but also the other beautiful buildings around it, the cathedral and the baptistry. So you actually get off the train station and walk for an hour or half an hour down this way to what they call the Campo dei Miracoli, which means the field of miracles. And here you can see it's at about a 5 or 6%, 5% lean or angle to the right. The Leaning Tower has been leaning since the 12th century, but it has now been stabilized in 2001. They still had the cables on them. You can kind of see that on the left side there. And the following year, they were done holding it in place. Because if they hadn't done that 20 years ago, it would maybe be starting to tip over now. But the obligatory thing to do is, for us, our group there at the bottom, is to lean to the left of the pictures. Okay, everybody lean. And there's lots of other people on Facebook that you can see, young people that do funny things with the Leaning Tower standing in front of it. So it's a very popular place. But the other buildings around it are just as magnificent, built around 1200. The baptistry on the right and the cathedral on the left. So, and another thing you can do is pay about $15 for the ticket to the top of the Leaning Tower, and you look down over the top of the cathedral and the baptistry. So now let's head down to east about an hour to Florence. In fact, up the river, the Arno River. Pisa and Florence are on the Arno River, which goes west of the Mediterranean Sea. And there's beautiful scenes throughout Tuscany. San Gimignano on the left, and Siena, Arezzo. There's lots of beautiful little towns, which we may visit another time. But Florence is the jewel of the Renaissance. And let's take a little tour here. You can see the Duomo, it's the famous cathedral along the Arno River. typical itinerary, I've been there 4 times, and usually you get off at the train station and you head over to the Duomo. We'll show you this in detail, the baptistry, the bell tower. And then everybody wants to see the David, which is over here, the Academy where Michelangelo's great David is. And then the center of town is the Piazza Signora. And we'll show you that. And then Santa Croce is another beautiful little plaza. And then the Uffizi Gallery with the great paintings. And the Ponte Vecchio is the bridge across, the famous bridge across the Arno. The Bibli Gardens will end up with. And so, if you look down on Florence from the top of the Duomo, the cathedral dome, Duomo just means dome. You can kind of see the red tile rooftops from the 1400s and 1500s. Such a great history here we'll talk about. But usually we start in Piazza Signora, where there are numerous huge statues on display. You're transported back into the 1500s when the history of this city had worldwide influence with Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Dante, and Galileo living here. So this is the Piazza Signora with Vecchio is the big building there and the tower. And you can see some of the statues here around here. It has this rich history where, in fact, in the 1490s, Savonarola was burned at the stake here. Many people were burned in the square here if they were sinners, they thought. And the Medicis did that to him. He was the priest that they invite, who was burning books and things. And the Medicis were very wealthy bankers who financed great artists like Michelangelo. And so they are largely responsible for the Renaissance. And that happened right here where his horse carriage is. It's a fun thing to do is take a little horse carriage around town. And you can see it was under construction back then, or at least they were cleaning everything, but let's take a closer look at some of these statues. They're huge masterpieces. On the left is Neptune, and here is Perseus in bronze from the 1500s. He's just beheaded Medusa. When I was 20, I took this picture on the right. I kind of looked up at the Vecchio Tower. Here's the Rape of the Sabines, and a Medici on horseback, and Hercules on the right, and on the left is the David, and it's where the David stood for hundreds of years until the 1800s, when it was moved to, this is just a replica in square outside, but it was moved to the Academy, which is about 10 blocks away. So that is where everybody wants to go and see the most amazing statue in the world. And I think just as amazing are the unfinished Michelangelos on the left and right on the way, because you can see, since he didn't finish them, you can see his work chiseling out of marble these amazing statues. There's a statue to him in another part of Florence. There's Michelangelo Buonarroti. When you go up to it, you just can't believe this thing, 17 feet high. He took a couple of years to make it when he was only in his 20s. And he carved it out of one piece of marble. Here's somebody cleaning it. You get a sense for how big it is. And the detail, chipping away into marble with it, to get those swirls of hair and the veins on his neck and the veins in his hand. You just can't believe that somebody could actually do that. And here's the unfinished Michelangelo's, just to get an idea of how you see their arms just coming out of the stone, like just kind of the stone is coming alive. He died before he was able to finish that. He was busy with some other things like the Sistine Chapel, which we're going to see in a little bit, and many other things. He was such an incredible genius. So now let's head over to the Duomo, a few blocks away. And it's a beautiful church that was built over 140 years from 1296. And so mostly in the 1300s. And has these amazing frescoes and friezes and statuary. And here's a close-up of the statue over the front door. It's called the Santa Maria delle Fiore, Saint Mary of the Flower. And you look up, and each of these statues is 6 feet tall. I can't believe how beautiful it is. You walk around the cobblestone streets, and then you go inside. And one fun thing to do is to go up to the top of the dome, to the top of the church. And this is the stairway that you have to navigate. And as you look out the windows inside, you can see this magnificent fresco of Jesus and all the characters of the Bible. And you get to the top, you can see on the left the cupola, where you come out and you overlook Florence. When the bells are ringing, it's really a beautiful experience. There's your view, looking east. And then you look down, next door is the baptistry. The baptistry is famous in Florence for the gates of paradise, which are these amazing doors, 4-ton doors made out of bronze and gilded in gold paint, created by the goldsmith Ghiberti in 1452. You can see the detail on the right there. There's 10 stories of the Bible that are priceless. And you look inside the baptistry and up at the ceiling, and there's another gold fresco. Beautiful. So on the left here, you can see that's the baptistry, the gates of paradise, the Duomo. So you walk a block and take the left, and there is famous Medici chapels. Remember, the Medici banking family financed everyone. So they have pretty big tombs here. In their chapels are the famous Michelangelo statues of Dusk and Dawn. There's 4 of them there, and then a couple statues to the Lorenzo, or to the Medicis. So they're all about 10 feet long and amazing as well. And then you head over, so a 10-minute walk over to Santa Croce, this beautiful church, which is a fun thing to do, is to have an ice cream and just sit in the plaza there and watch the kids play soccer, or football as they call it. And then when you go inside, you find out that Michelangelo is buried there, Galileo, Michelangelo on the right, Galileo on the left. Beautiful mausoleums to them. Others there are Dante Alighieri, the great poet about the Divine Comedy, one of the earliest, greatest works of literature. literature, and Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote the political book, The Prince, very influential in politics. And there's Michelangelo in the middle. Question? Oh, good. If you have any questions, please stop me. I love to answer. I'm a teacher. I taught world history, so I answer questions if I can. And Galileo on the left, who challenged the church, got into some trouble there, saying that no, the planets go around the sun, not the other way around. Very famous in the Renaissance. And then Leonardo da Vinci really, he was born and lived most of his life about 5 miles away in the province of Vinci. But he spent some years in Florence, and then of course in Rome, we'll see too. So now let's head back to the square to go to the Uffizi Gallery, which is right next door. So you're looking up at the replica of David and Hercules statue in Piazza Signorum, and you turn around and you see this, which is the famous Uffizi Gallery. And when you go through there, you're just amazed at the priceless works of art there. Some of the most famous paintings in the world, like The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli on the bottom, and Botticelli's right, A Spring on the right, Leonardo da Vinci's Virgin Mary, another Leonardo da Vinci on the left. You really only had a few paintings. The most famous, of course, Mona Lisa, which I'll show you in December when I do the Paris tour. And then this is Ariadne, this famous sculptor. There's artists everywhere. You feel, in fact, art students from around the world or college students are walking around. So you meet Americans and Europeans who are there to study on a semester. And so there's artists everywhere. Florence is also known for its leather, so there's a lot of leather purses, leather jackets and belts and things. And there's also a lot of North African street vendors here selling some sunglasses. You see them throughout Italy, Rome too. Here's my students on the Arno River, one of my favorite pictures of them. I taught in Eden Prairie, so they're from, some are from Minnetonka. And in the distance is the Ponte Vecchio, which is just a couple blocks that way. And Ponte Vecchio is the most famous bridge. It has a number of jewelry shops on there. Goldsmiths love to, people love to go there and shop for jewelry. And so you cross the Ponte Vecchio and you get to the Oboli Gardens, which are beautiful gardens, kind of like Versailles, with lots of statues and fountains, and a view of all of the rooftops of Florence across the river. But you can walk around there for hours. The Oboli Gardens. And the last thing we usually do in Florence is go up for the sunset at Michelangelo's Piazza Michelangelo, with another replica of the David, but it overlooks a beautiful view of Florence. So, buonasera Firenze. They call it Firenze, is their word for Florence. Firenze, buonasera means good night. So that's Florence, beautiful sunset. And so now, let's head over, we'll head to Rome, but one thing to show you, just one slide first, or a couple slides, is another favorite place, Lake Como, which is actually a little bit farther north in Bellagio. It's beautiful lakes where there's many villas, and this is George Clooney's house, a lot of famous people there. But I went through there, stayed there on the way to Rome,
story because I had taken the students from Rome to Florence to Paris with another teacher. The other teacher flew home with them from Paris so that I could go back to Rome and meet my family who were flying in there. Sue's over here right now. My wife, Susan, and my 3 sons. And so when I was in Como, though, which is halfway from Paris to Rome, I got on the train and they said, oh no, you can't get on here, it's too full, we're overbooked. And the reason why is because Pope John Paul, this was in March of 2005, was about to give his last Mass, the Easter Mass. That was the Easter weekend. And I didn't realize it would be that bad, so I'm getting really nervous. I was going to give him the story, the true story, that I had to meet my family tomorrow morning. And they don't know, they've never been there before, so I had to have the hotel ready for them. And didn't do that. Instead, I just took a $20, and kind of flashed it to him like this, and he just looked the other way and grabbed it, and he just started walking away. And so he let me get on the train, thank God, otherwise I would have been stuck in beautiful Como. But instead I made it to Rome. And in Rome, here we are in front of the Colosseum. So let's take a tour of Rome. The typical thing for a couple of days is to start in chronologically. 2,000 years ago at the Colosseum, and then you walk through the Forum, the ancient capital of Rome for 1,000 years, and then over to Circus Maximus, and the Vittorio Emanuele, I'll show you that. And then the second day we'll go to the Spanish Steps. The famous walk is from the Spanish Steps to the Trevi Fountain, to the Pantheon, to the Piazza Navona, to the Angel Bridge, and the Vatican and the Sistine Chapel. So we'll do that the second day. So let's start here with the Colosseum. Here it is in the 1700s. It's pretty well preserved, but half of it is gone. They used a lot of it to build newer buildings over the years. They stole the marble. But it was built in 80 AD. It's also called the Flavian Amphitheater. Here's my family in front of it. And you can rent a horse carriage around it if you want. But it is an awe-inspiring experience to go in there. It's very huge. It holds about 70,000 people, which is the same as the U.S. Bank Stadium today, roughly. And they've recreated the floor here. You can kind of see where the floor, below where the floor was, are all the cells where the gladiators and all the slaves and the animals like tigers and lions and thousands of animals were slaughtered in there over the few hundred years that they had shows there. Yes, and they were free. They were given bread, at the beginning of each of they'd throw bread to them. So that's where the phrase "given bread in circuses" came from. And when you're walking across that plank, you can look down and see kind of how they did that. There's some gladiator actors outside. There's me pretending with him, and you give him a euro afterwards. It's kind of fun. But in here, there were thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Christians crucified and martyred. And in fact, the Pope, there's a cross here because every year the Pope comes and blesses the souls of the martyrs. And when you look out one of the windows from the second floor, you can see the Arch of Constantine next door. So all those times when the Christians were killed led up to 312 AD when Rome in fact became Christian because of Constantine, who this arch is named after. He was about to go through this battle, and he looked up in the sky and saw a cross, and it was a vision to him, so he had all the soldiers put the cross on their shields, and they won the battle, and he saw a sign from God. So since then, Europe has pretty much been Christian since that time. So the Arch of Constantine is right there. Here's some of the horse carriages. And now we're going to head up this Appian Way, famous cobblestone, 2,000 years road. And this goes up to the Arch of Titus on the right. It says Senatus Populus Romanus. Popular sovereignty votes for the senators. And that's how far back that goes. And you start down, walking through these ancient ruins. They were all torn down around 500 AD by the barbarians, but if you stand up on the balcony where the emperor stood, you can look from the right to the left and you get this view of the buildings. And some are pretty interesting, like this one here is so well preserved because it's a church built inside the ancient temple. You get this amazing sense of time when you know that the temple was built in 100 AD, and then the church was built in like 700 AD. And you keep walking and you see this is the oldest temple, 500 BC. But it's an amazing place with so much history. So that's the ancient forum. This is a reconstruction of that, what it used to look like with the Colosseum. Now we'll walk over to what was once the Circus Maximus. You recognize Charlton Heston? What's the movie? Ben-Hur, right? Yeah, so I used to show that to my students when I was not the whole thing, but the chariot race was a favorite scene. And as they went up and down, back and forth here, and this held more like 90 or 100,000 people. It was incredibly huge. But today, it's just a beautiful park. It's actually just a barren park. And on the ruins on the left are where what is left of the Emperor's Palace. But that's the Circus Maximus. And then
Moses with horns. That was a misinterpretation.
what was this?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Interesting. No, she said Moses with horns.
Oh, yeah, so this is now a new thing. About 4 or 5 blocks away is the Church of Santa Vercoli. Anyway, inside what's famous is Michelangelo's statue of Moses. And it was going to be a lot more elaborate with about 20 statues, but he died before he could finish it. But this part is just incredible. 12 feet high, built carved in the 1500s. And so that's Moses. And then another block from the Circus Maximus is you go in this door here under this tower, and you see the Boca Verite. How many of you seen Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn? And there's this famous scene where Gregory puts his hand in there. And that's what the tourists do. They all line up. There's sometimes a block-long line. You take your turn to put your hand and take a picture like he did. And he, of course, pretended that it bit his hand off. A memorable scene. That's the Boca. Boca means mouth, and Verita means truth. So the mouth of truth. And then you walk a few more blocks over to the Trajan's column, the Trajan's market. This amazing column, which has kind of a storyboard of these battles that they had, starting at the bottom chronologically, it's winding around all the way to the top, 120 feet. And that was built in 100 AD. It's amazing how old it is. But this is much newer, and it's the biggest building in Rome. It's called the Vittorio Emanuele, after the emperor in the 1800s. And the Romans, they hate it, so they call it the wedding cake. It sticks up like a wedding cake over the town, and right in the middle of all the beautiful buildings of ancient Rome. So they think it's kind of a travesty. This guy had a really big ego. Said, I'm going to build the biggest monument, bigger than any, and they hate it. But anyway, it's very memorable. Then next door to that is the Capri museums. And when you walk up the ramp to them, you see Castor and Pollux on the left and right, huge statues. And it's a beautiful piazza square here. And this again, another thing Michelangelo was busy doing, he designed this beautiful square with the 12-pointed star here. And in the center is a statue to Marcus Aurelius on horseback. There's my two sons sitting there. And next door, a famous thing to do is to see the Constantine statue. What's left of it, his head is 10 feet high, and the statue is 60 feet high, but it was all torn down by the barbarians, but the few pieces of it are on display in the museum there. And a fun thing to do at the end of your first day in Rome is to go to a restaurant. This one overlooks the Forum. And here's some of the dishes: fruta de mare, and carne, pasta, and finish it off with some tiramisu. It's a great thing to do, of course, is to have an Italian meal. So the next morning, let's head over to the most famous walk that everybody does, with beautiful sights along the way. You start at Piazza del Popolo, the Pope's Plaza. And in the distance, you can see how far away it is to the Vatican. That's how we're going to wander our way through Rome to the St. Peter's Church. And so we start out in this piazza, and it's surrounded by the Via Borghese, this huge park called Borghese, with beautiful ponds and statues and gardens in it. Nice quiet place before you head out into the street with millions of people. And so that is up here, Piazza del Popolo. And first we're going to go to the Spanish Steps, and Trevi Fountain, and Pantheon, and some more things I'll show you. But we start at the Spanish Steps, great meeting place. Many movies were made there. The Talented Mr. Ripley, Roman Holiday, scenes in many movies from this area. And when you go to the top of the steps, you get a view of the Vatican in the distance. You can get your portrait done. And in the evening, since we were staying only a few blocks away, our family would go over and the boys would listen to these Italians in the spring just singing different songs with guitars. So it was kind of a hootenanny going on every night at the Spanish Steps. So now we'll start walking to the Trevi Fountain, and everywhere along this walk you see these, what seems like statues. And you kind of go up to them, and then all of a sudden you see them move a little bit. You realize they're actually human, and they have a tip jar nearby. That's how they make a living. So they'll kind of scare you when they move. That's kind of fun. But we head towards the famous Trevi Fountain. And the Trevi Fountain was built in 1762 by Panini. It was the intersection of a number of these springs in ancient Rome. And it's famous for different movies like 3 coins in the fountain. And Gidget goes to Rome. They even have a screen up there. There's Gidget, where you can watch movies at night. But the thing to do is to throw a coin over your shoulder and make a wish. And if you, when you make that wish, hopefully, if it comes true, you will come back to Rome someday. So everybody goes up there and takes the obligatory photograph of that. So I wished 3 times and it worked each time I came back. So, then you can stop for souvenirs. They're everywhere. A magnet for your refrigerator. Or roasted chestnuts. I like this old guy sitting here. And fruits and vegetables. Fruit di Roma. But the most favorite thing to do is to get gelato. It's the most delicious ice cream. If you haven't had it, when you're in Italy, of course they invented it. The emperors had them take snow down from the Alps and bring it all the way to the home. It took many days on ice, and they really know how to make it. And it's kind of fun because you can see they have, to help you know what flavor it is. Kiwi has a kiwi in it, mango,
Is that
pineapple.
sanitary?
It's a
Would
what?
we, by American standards, having that fruit in there all day, would that be sanitary?
Probably not.
You know what I'm saying?
That's why we don't do it here. I totally know what you're saying. Although it's a little chilled, but nobody seems to mind it. But yeah, there's definitely different standards in Europe, especially with the meat. They have the meat hanging in butcher shops, and that, flies around. And sometime in Greece, you'll see. I agree. So let's add a couple more blocks on this wonderful walk to the Pantheon. This is the most amazing building, my favorite one. It influenced many others, like our Congress building and our Jefferson Memorial. In that you could put a sphere inside it, a huge wall, because it's a rotunda, and it's built in 14 AD during the time of Tiberius. And it's then later in the 7th century, it was made into a church. So Pantheon means all the God. Pan means all, theos. So it was really originally created by Agrippa. You can see his name here, Marcus Agrippa, in 14 AD, but then 500, 600 years later turned into a church. And that's why it's the most well-preserved building, ancient building in Rome. And you go inside and it's just this amazing ceiling held up. Very revolutionary at that time to be able to hold up a ceiling that big out of marble. And it has a hole in the ceiling. So if you're there on a rainy day, it's kind of fun because there's this stream of rain just coming down the middle, and there's a hole in the floor where the water goes down. But it's a column of rain on a rainy day. The doors are 30 feet high. And outside are some gladiator actors. Here he's having a smoke break. Kind of funny. Beautiful fountains everywhere. And by the way, you can get clean water, drinking water all throughout Rome. They have this system of fountains. I suppose during the pandemic, things are different now, but back then everybody was able to drink from there and nobody got sick. Then you keep walking, the next stop is the Piazza Navona, the new plaza, and it was built over a chariot stadium, oval track, kind of like Circus Maximus. Yeah, so that's why the shape, but they have 3 famous fountains there. Here's my family in front of the 4 Rivers statue in the center. That's this one. And you may remember that from the movie Angels and Demons with Tom Hanks, where the cardinal was murdered and thrown into that famous book after, And you can get your portrait done there, or street performers. A good place to just have a glass of wine and relax and watch the people coming and going. The sound of water in the fountains. And a few more blocks, we're heading our way, getting close to the Vatican now, and we cross the Tiber River. Remember, the Tiber is the huge river that goes through Rome. And you cross the 12-angel bridge, which is just amazing. It has 12 gigantic statues built around 130 AD. And so they're 1,900-year-old statues, just beautifully preserved. And they lead up to the Castle St. Angelo, this huge building here. And that is owned by the Vatican. The Vatican City is a separate municipality with its own government within Rome. And you can see the Angel Bridge over here that we just crossed in Piazza Navona. You can even see the Pantheon there. We've walked this way. And now we're going to walk up towards the St. Peters Cathedral. St. Peter's, of course, finished in 1626. It is the largest church in the world and the most famous, the most renowned work of Renaissance architecture. Gigantic statues lining up above and in the interior. Each of these statues are 15 feet high here of Jesus and St. Peter. But you walk inside, and it is you really realize you're in the biggest church on earth. The ceilings are so high, 100 feet, and the gigantic golden altar on the left, and the echoes as you walk on the marble floor. And you look to the right as you walk in, and you see the Pieta, La Pieta, another Michelangelo statue, which he made in his early 20s in 1499. And in the 1970s, a not very well man went up there and chiseled away at it, so now they restored it and put plexiglass behind it, in front of it, so that you can't do that anymore. But other than that, it's been well preserved. And there's the altar with, it seems like the rays of the sun coming out on me. But you look at this huge statues on each side, dozens of them. They're each 15, 20 feet tall. And then you go down into the mausoleum, and it's interesting, the church was built on the site of the ancient temple to Nero in 64 AD. Nero, there was a Rome burned in the fire, and famously Nero blamed the fire on the Christians. And so St. Peter was there at the time, and St. Paul. But St. Peter, he crucified upside down at this point, and the whole church is centered around that site. And when you go down underneath into the mausoleums where all the popes are buried, you can see some of the columns here of the ancient temple where they were. You go down these stairs and walk through the basement with the low ceiling, and it's very interesting down there. And that is where the 266 popes since St. Peter, the very first one, are buried. And here is my one photograph, kind of blurry, in 1975 when I was there. there was a mass being held by Pope Paul II. Pope Paul II. And, or the sixth, Pope Paul VI. But then when we went other times in the 2000s, you look to the right, when you're in the square, it's always the second window from the left, the right, on the top floor, that he comes out during Sunday Mass. And so you can just barely see him there. And then they have video screens on to show, and thousands of worshipers from around the world are there. And, but in 2005, it was his last Easter Mass. And here are the Swiss guards that you see everywhere when you're in the Vatican City with the funny looking uniforms, but they're very tough and serious as they protect the Vatican. And on the right, you see, we're going to head over to the Sistine Chapel, kind of the position of it. We're going to go through the Vatican Museum now and end up there. You can see this is when the smoke went up to indicate that they had chosen a new pope. I'll tell you about that in a second. Here it is at night. Sometimes I would go down there at night just to take photographs of the fountain. It's beautiful. And so next door is the Vatican Museum. We'll go down this hall here now. And when you get to the end, you get to the Sistine Chapel. That's this here. The ceiling, I'll show you that. But very famous and priceless statues and paintings and tapestries. You can't believe it when you're walking down there. All the things. The Lacombe group here is one of the more famous ones, because how do you carve these snakes like this without it breaking? But he's being tormented by this snake. Most incredible statue. And this one may look familiar. That's the Burwell statue. I'm also, for 12 years until this year, I was the president of the Minnetonka Historical Society, and I took care of the Burwell House. And there's this statue that we always wondered where it came from. And when I took my students in the Vatican, there it was. And so we looked up a little more, and it turns out the Burwells hired somebody to send them a replica of it in the 1890s. And so it's been there ever since, a copy. And you'll see that in the Burwell Museum if you go there. It came from the Vatican. Just hundreds and hundreds of statues and priceless artworks. And when you get to the end of the hall, as I indicated, you get to the Sistine Chapel. And usually it's much more crowded than this. And there's guards all saying, shh, be quiet, don't take any pictures, no photografias. But some people try to do that anyway. Here's Pope Benedict here in the chapel. There's beautiful paintings all around. And of course, on the ceiling is the masterpiece of Michelangelo. So in 1541, he painted this fresco called The Last Judgment on the wall. That was later in his life. And it shows Jesus in the middle, and all the sinners on the right going down. This one's realizing this last judgment. He's been told he's a sinner, so he must go down to hell with the devils. And on the left are the saints who are good, and they're rising up to heaven with the cross. And the pagan column symbolizing the sinners on the right. So it's transforming the ancient Rome on the right to the Christian Rome, Vatican City on the right, on the left. And the self-portrait of Michelangelo is right here. It's his skin being held up. But in 1975, I took one picture of the ceiling. I couldn't take many pictures back then. But you can see how dark it was. It was full of soot from, think of it, 500 years of candle soot. And around 2000, there was a 10-year cleaning job done to it. And it's amazingly beautiful and bright now. They had to go up there with chemicals and slowly clean everything. And Michelangelo's masterpiece on the ceiling tells the stories of the Old Testament, starting with Adam being touched by life from God, and down to Adam and Eve being banished from the Garden of Eden. And so that's the Sistine Chapel. As you walk out, there's this beautiful stairway. And the last things many people do in Rome is they go to the catacombs, which are throughout Rome. And that's where many of the Christians hid out. They have during the Roman Empire, so they wouldn't get killed. And many of them, they kind of collected all the skulls, so it's pretty eerie. So that's Rome. Now let's head to our last place, which I always recommend, is to go down to the Bay of Naples and see Pompeii and Capri. Here's kind of an aerial of that. It's the big town of Naples and Mount Vesuvius overlooking Pompeii. And then we'll stay in this little town of Sorrento, and we'll go to the island of Capri, and we'll go down this coast of Amalfi to coast down. And I'll get to that. First, let's take a look at Pompeii, one of the great sites in the world. This is the way the town looked before August 24th, 79 AD. And there's a big explosion of Mount Vesuvius every 2,000 years. And here is Naples with 3 million people within 20 miles of it. If it blows again soon, which it's overdue, it could kill hundreds of thousands of people, but they don't seem to be too worried about it. But back in 79 AD, it was a huge calamity, with this town of 10,000 people covered in 10 feet of ash. When it blew, it destroyed all the red tile roofs, but it left the walls. And here we're going to look around the Basilica, the Temple of Apollo, and the big square in the center. Here's the square with the Temple of Jupiter. You can see how this whole mountain top of it blew off. Kind of looks like it was just exploded off. But it was a beautiful little town until that day in 79 AD. Here's the Basilica where the government, the judges, and the lawyers, kind of the court system there. And the Temple of Apollo is the most famous statue there that kind of symbolizes Pompeii. And the interesting thing that happened here is that after the 10 feet of ash fell on the town, it was lost in time until around the 1700s. They started digging down into the 10 or 15 feet of hardened ash. And they would get to a cavity, as you can see on the bottom right here, and they look inside, it's empty except for bones, and maybe the jewelry and the coins that they were holding at the exact moment that they died. And they had the great idea to pour plaster down into this cavity. And here you can see what they're doing it now. And so now we have 2,000 plaster casts of humans in the position they were in at the exact moment of that day, August 24, 79 AD. And they're just horrified by what has happened. Why is this happening to me? And here's some jewelry on your hand still. So, and sometimes there's animals too, horses and pigs you see. And this dog famously curled up up because he was on the end of his chain. They came down, the chain was attached to the floor, but as they're digging down, he's 8 feet up here at the end of the chain because he kept climbing up on top of the, it's like snow, but you can stand on it. And he's at the top there, and he got to the end of his chain, and that's where he died. So, it's amazing things. And by the way, there's lots of dogs today, wild, kind of they're free, just walking around. And there's these fountains. There's the boys. And the ruts in the street are very fascinating too. You can see these ruts because there was 300 or 400 years of history of the carts every day going through here to avoid the walking stones that you walk across the street in. And the sewer system was really pretty good too. But these ruts are indented in there many inches, showing how long the history was before it was bigger. Here's the tavern, frozen in time. Here's some bread, which is 1,900 years old from that day. It's a little stale now. And you saw bags of coins they found and just different things from that day, just what happened when they all of a sudden had to stop. Another thing to do is to go through the forum baths. These baths, there's the frigid area first, there's the cold one, and then you go into the tepid area, which is tepid, and medium heat. These statues of Hercules at the bottom. And then into the cold area, which is the hot sun. And you splash cold water on yourself. And you can walk through the beautiful villas. There's dozens of them. And it's only 2/3, well, not like half excavated. There's still many, many decades of excavating left to do. More treasures to find, but everywhere they go, they find frescoes on the wall, well preserved. Like this one in the Villa of Mysteries is the best one. And you find mosaics like this one here. It says Cave Canum. Canis means dog. What do you think that means? Beware of the dog. That's their sign of it. And Alexander the Great, huge mosaic. And then you go down to the brothel, is a very famous or popular stop. There were lots of brothels. There was where the Roman Navy stayed. They still have the beds and frescoes on the wall, which are a little bit risque. And then over to the theater district, there's an Odeon, which was covered. This one, beautiful stone theater, and then a large theater next to it. And you can kind of see what the large theater looked like back in the day, with the stage here. And next to that is the Palestra, where the gladiators would practice and train. And next to that, as you walk down the other side of Pompeii, you get to the last thing is the amphitheater. The huge amphitheater next to the Palestra where they trained. The gladiators would go down in this tunnel here and appear in the middle of this stadium. And just like in Rome, in the Colosseum, they would have their gladiator fights and everything else. But it's older than the Colosseum in Rome. This is 80 BC, and the Roman Colosseum is 80 AD. So it's 160 years older, and it's really well preserved because it was covered in ash for 2,000 years. And so you can run all around it. It's beautiful. And it's famous for having the rock band Pink Floyd play restrooms. They're public restrooms because only the wealthy people had a bathroom. And so there's a number of these around. Most of them look like this now, but they had less modesty back then, for sure. So our last couple things to do here is we're staying in Sorrento, so let's go to the Amalfi Coast and Capri. This is one of the most beautiful parts of Italy that I always recommend. When you come in, you take the ferry to Sorrento. It's up on a cliff here, and you take an elevator up there to get to the main street. And let's take a walk down to the town. There's some gentlemen sitting around talking in Italian. And here's the main square. You can have dinner here. And it's a great place to shop in Sorrento. Look at the size of these lemons. My son's holding it's gigantic. It's really well known because the volcanic ash around there. It's a great place to grow things. So our view from the hotel, you can see Mount Vesuvius in the distance across the Bay of Naples. So we actually stayed in this little Marina Grande in this hotel. And inexpensive, I mean, $50 a night compared to here. And so we would walk every day to Sorrento from this beautiful little fishing village. And if you walk around there, you see the fishermen all sitting around talking. So it was nice, it wasn't very touristy. And even this old 90-year-old fisherman mending the net. It's kind of fun to watch him. Been doing it for 70 years probably. So then we hired a driver to go down the most amazing drive on earth, a lot of people say, the Amalfi Coast Drive, which is hairpin turns everywhere. Fortunately, he was driving, not us. And you go along these cliffs and see these huge buildings, small villages up on the hillside. Beautiful, colorful paint. Like here in Positano, the most famous town is, besides Amalfi, is Positano. Here's a man sanding his boat. And there's the town of Positano on the beach. And then the next town is Amalfi. We walk up around in there too. So we stopped at each of these places as we're driving down the coast. Just beauty everywhere. Great place to stop and swim to, or have a lunch on the shore. This is Amalfi, which was a trading empire, kind of like Venice, for a couple hundred years. It was a very powerful town, but now it's just a tourist village now. One of the scenes there. And there's the church of Amalfi, and some of the statues in the square. We even saw a kayak polo game we watched for a while. All the Italians were watching these men play soccer or polo. And then the fun thing to do is to go up to Ravello, up in the mountains. Ravello is a famous, beautiful little town. And you can have a dinner like we did overlooking the Amalfi Coast. Here's the view looking down from where we ate. And it was kind of interesting at the time, there was a wedding, an Italian wedding right next door on the balcony. So here's the photographer taking pictures of the family. So it was a real experience. And then the last thing we'll do, finish it up by going to the beautiful island of Capri. You take a little ferry for 15 minutes from Sorrento to this amazing island with lots of history that had their villas here, and now it's the rich and famous. And just regular tourists love to go there. Beautiful little harbor town with lots of colorful fishing boats. There's many movies made here too as well. There's one with Clark Gable and Sophia Loren. It's all filmed right in this harbor here. And the thing to do is to go up this winding path on a bus. It's kind of a scary ride to go up to the top of Capri, actually called Capri. And there's a little town there where you can do some shopping. But the funnest thing for my students and my family to do is to get on the ski lift, which is outside in the summertime. You can talk to each other. You don't have ski clothes on. And you're looking down on the gardens of the Italians. Beautiful little gardens that they made out of shells and stones. And you're going up to the Mount Salaro at the top to get a view of the whole bay here. This beautiful view of Sorrento and the Amalfi Coast in the distance, and that Mount Vesuvius. And these famous rocks where boats can go through a tunnel. They go through a tunnel right here. And then we take a little stroll in the main town. There's lots of shops, expensive shops, Louis Vuitton and Gucci. And they're known for their lemon drinks and their perfume. And then the last thing we do is go to the Blue Grotto and take a little boat trip into this cave, which just has amazing blue water. And that's kind of the last fun thing to do. So, arrivederci. That's the end. Thank you very much. I hope you learned some things. Any questions? 1,000-year-old city. And from the station, you're immediately dropped off. Well, you can see here that we're immediately dropped off